Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alastair.
And I'm Nick.
And in our 60th episode, we'll be reviewing Wes Anderson's new animated film, Isle of Dogs, and then discussing, can any new talking animal film surpass The Jungle Book? Lots to get into today, but before all of that, Nick, what have you been up to recently?
Well, since we last recorded, I've been catching up on Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., a show that makes people across the globe go, oh wow, are they still making that? To which I can only say, yeah, apparently they are, and eventually it became surprisingly alright. It's a hard show to recommend in the conventional sense because a lot of the first 3 seasons, especially the third one, is kind of shit, or at least kind of boring. But yeah, if you can make it to season 4, it does actually eventually establish this sort of nice, steady sense of fun. I've really been enjoying the last 1 1/3 seasons. So yeah, the current storyline, they've gone to space. This is very much on a telly budget, and that telly budget is not as high as Star Trek Discovery's telly budget. This is very much space, courtesy of about 6 different corridors, a couple of grand courtroom sets, and a few people painted blue. But nonetheless, it's something new. They did Ghost Rider last year, and then they did a Trapped in Virtual Reality Robot Land story. So yeah, after 3 years of occasionally slightly drab pseudo-espionage running around corridors, I'm quite enjoying the way they've decided to go a bit more overtly comic booky in the last couple of seasons. I think that might be what's really selling it beyond it.
So I assume they're not sticking to a plot that's kind of parallel to the Avengers cinematic shared universe plot.
Not really. I mean, there's a degree of behind-the-scenes politicking in Marvel land, which may not be that interesting to talk about at length, but it seems like a few years back there was some sort of dramatic management split between the people who make the films and the people who make the TV. As a result, it's been a while since Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has had any particularly major film crossovers. Like, the first season had a couple of cameos from Samuel L. Jackson. He hasn't been by for a while, old Sam. They also had Sif from the first and second 4 films a couple of times. Again, she has left them be for quite a long time. The first half of last season they did Ghost Rider, and that came out around the same time as Doctor Strange. I think there might have been meant to be a tiny bit of synergy there, sort of magic.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But for the most part, no, I think they've kind of given up on actually really crossing over with the films. I think they're just doing their own thing at this point. The show is probably better for it, to be honest.
Yeah, so it's a thing to be enjoyed in its own right.
Yeah, they've managed to carve out their own sort of approach to the comic stuff, wherein they do these silly concepts in a sort of a relatively straight-faced but not boringly slow po-faced way, and they aren't quite as soapy and weepy and desperately melodramatic as the CW shows sometimes get. They are actually allowed to appear to be adults having fun rather than adults acting suspiciously like teenagers, which can sometimes be the case in Flash and Arrow. There is quite a lot of sobbing and moping. So yeah, the most I can say as a recommendation is, if you got bored of the show after season 3, firstly, I don't blame you, it was terrible, but secondly, it might be worth giving season 4 a chance if you're ever at a loss or something to watch. It did become fun somehow. It did really just abandon some very long-running, slow-moving, inhuman storylines and go a bit sillier.
Yeah, so it seems like they've found a kind of format that works for them and their audience.
Yeah, and Phil Coulson, it turns out, even though he was maybe not always the most fascinating character in the Marvel films, has actually sort of relaxed into quite a fun leading man. He's got a nice sort of vibe, avuncular charm going on. And him and people around him, they've eventually trimmed the fat and killed off most of the characters who weren't working. And they've got a pretty good fun cast going on now. And also the fight scenes are surprisingly good and crunchy. Like, they don't feel as CGI and weightless as the films sometimes do. They've clearly actually, to make up for the fact they can't do that much special effects, they do take their time to set up some quite good, energetic sort of martial arts fight scenes where you can really feel people getting smashed through tables and stuff.
Alright, sounds good.
So I can appreciate that. And so anyway, yeah, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's better than you might think. And that was me. Alastair, how about you?
Well, I've been watching a film, but it was a film that was sent direct to Netflix, which is unusual, but I guess becoming more common. So I was watching Alex Garland's latest film, Annihilation.
Ooh, I wanted to watch this, yes.
Starring Natalie Portman. It's very good. I liked it a lot. I think there's been, I wouldn't say controversy, there's been some discussion around it. A lot of people are saying it's good. How come the producers didn't think it would, be a success in the cinema, or, whoever gets to sign off the fact that this film's going to be in the cinema. And also some people saying that, it's got charm, but it's quite an unusual film. They can see why, why it wouldn't necessarily find an audience in the cinema, but it's found an audience on Netflix. I don't want to call it like hard science fiction, but it's much more kind of, science fiction more similar to what you'd find in a science fiction novel than what you get in a lot of science fiction TV shows or films, in that it is about actual scientists investigating something that's sort of mysterious and sort of unusual, rather than people on a sort of fun adventure through space. I think the thing I can compare it most to is probably Arrival. I can imagine it got commissioned in the wake of the sort of success of Arrival, in that, people now maybe they're interested in some more serious science fiction.
I've heard that comparison, yeah. And as discussed on this show many times, I did really like Arrival, so...
Arrival's very good, and this is excellent. Yeah, I don't want to say too much, obviously, because I'd recommend people go see it, but it is quite scary. It does a really good job of, like, building tension up, a fairly, what you think, straightforward premise, and then kind of just really layers the tension over it. And it's got some interesting scientific ideas behind them. I'm not necessarily sure to what degree they hold water, but they do a good job of selling it in the film. Yeah, they've got some actual interesting sort of science to explore, rather than, again, in a lot of science fiction films or TV shows, it's kind of like there's the science box that does the weird science, and that's what makes it science fiction. Whereas in this, now they've got feel like they've thought about the science behind this and how it's going to work. It's got some pretty interesting aliens in it as well.
As I haven't seen the film, but I have been making a vague effort to avoid spoilers, so I don't know that much about what it's about. I know it's meant to be really good, and as you say, I've seen the Arrival comparisons, which did make me want to seek it out. And also, it did get a cinema release in America, didn't it? There was some amusingly awful quote from some higher up, well, possibly a paraphrased quote passed on to someone, saying that it was felt to be too intellectual to be released in cinemas overseas or something, which is a strange phrase with strange connotations. But yeah, there does seem to have been some sort of worry by the studio about its, financial viability in the cinema, I guess.
Yeah.
Except in America for some reason.
Well, it's quite an unusual film. It doesn't feel like a lot of films that are in the cinema recently, like, other than Arrival, I can't really think of anything similar. And I can see why people might be like, well, this isn't the sort of thing that normally does well in the cinema, but I really liked it because it was a bit different. It was quite unusual. It was nice, to watch something that was maybe a bit more challenging than normal, or just something that just felt tonally quite different from what you normally get in the cinema. I guess when people look at it, where it was getting a cinema release, they thought it could be this year's sort of word of mouth viral hit, like Get Out or Arrival was to a degree, or they thought it might be just a film that vanishes and is never heard from again. But I'm glad that it has become, something of a viral hit on Netflix.
I don't know, it just seems odd in the face of the things that do get a cinema release. But this film, which I'm assuming, from the sound of it and the tiny bits I've seen of it, must have been quite expensive. They didn't at least try and put it out in the cinema to make its money back. But I guess a lot of these films make the bulk of their money in America anyway, so
yeah,
maybe putting it out internationally is more time and effort than it might be worth. Who knows? I'm not an expert in cinema economics.
Yeah, well, I know it costs a lot of money to print and distribute films and to promote them, so...
There's a degree to which I'm amazed they're still printing and distributing films and not just sending the files digitally.
Yeah, digital technology has made this process cheaper, but there's still a certain amount of promotion that has to be done. Yeah, maybe more people with interesting or unusual ideas will go straight to Netflix or Amazon in the future. There's maybe is a sign that, like, if you've got an interesting vision and want to do something a bit different, maybe Netflix is the better place to be than in the cinema.
I mean, that has been true of television, although with films, I don't know, this is certainly one of the first major times I've heard of recently where straight to Netflix movie has not been code for bad rubbish movie.
Yeah.
Or I can see why this didn't get a cinema deal type movie. So a lot of the time, if a film was on Netflix and you go, oh, that has a surprisingly big star on it, or that has a surprisingly big director attached, and then you watch it, it's like, oh, and yet. Not in this case, apparently, but there seems to be a bit of a trend of that.
Yeah, because a lot of Netflix or Amazon movies they make do get cinema releases. Like, I think Manchester by the Sea was made by Amazon, I think, and then got a cinema release. And obviously went on to win an Oscar, I believe, maybe more than one. And there's been others. But yeah, this is the first time that I think there's been a real kind of word-of-mouth viral hit for a direct-to-Netflix film. But, hopefully that means that in the future people will be less cynical when they hear about a film that goes straight to Netflix.
I'll just wait for the reviews myself, but fair enough. Okay, and now our feature review for this fortnight is Isle of Dogs, the new stop-motion animation movie written and directed by Wes Anderson. This is about an alternate version of Japan in which all dogs have been exiled to Trash Island as a result of widespread panic over a dog flu outbreak that may or may not have been engineered by corrupt politicians, and then a young boy flies to the island to try and find his beloved dog, and meets a bunch of canine misfits, and they go on a little cute adventure, and it's all very cute. That's very much the watchword here. So yes, this is the new Wes Anderson movie. Alastair, I think, is quite excited for this as a Wes Anderson fan. I myself, you may be shocked to hear, have never seen any of his films. So we'll start with you, Alastair. Did this live up to your dreams?
I did really like it. Yeah, but as you say, I'm a big Wes Anderson fan. I love his style, how it's sort of really like offbeat. It's very quirky. There's such a distinctive way that his films are shot, with like so many shots of the characters looking straight on into camera. And this had all the hallmarks of Wes Anderson. You like the kind of the sort of the quirky dialogue, the bits of wistful folk music, the sort of gentle humour, the kind of overarching tone of sweetness. So yeah, certainly one for the Wes Anderson fans, especially if you enjoyed his adaptation of Fantastic Mr. Fox, which I think is the other animated film that he made. I don't think he's done any other animated films. I'm interested in what you thought of it, Nick, coming to Wes Anderson with less experience of his work.
Well, fundamentally, it's pretty, cute and enjoyable and lovable. Generally, there's a new sort of pleasant or fun bits to make you smile in most of the film, except the bits when it's trying to be, like, grisly or scary, which it does also pull off. Basically, it does, visually make you feel things, which is nice. It did remind me quite a lot of, again, having not seen much actual Wes Anderson, just quite a lot of films I think I was watching as a sort of studenty, late teen, early 20-something person in the 2000s. I think we've spoken about them before and called them like Hollywood indie films, where people walk around slowly and sadly while sort of guitar-y, plinky indie music plays. He said as he walked slowly down the street and a bird shits on his shoulder or something. I think I might be specifically thinking of that film where Nicolas Cage plays a weatherman having an existential crisis there. But yeah, there's a certain area of sort of quirky existential indie films, and obviously this, being an animated film about stop-motion dogs, moved away from that a little. But it did, as you say, there's lots of long shots, like, I don't know if that's the Hollywood equivalent of a Stuart Lee routine, where you just linger on the characters for slightly longer than you otherwise would, so it goes sort of from poignant to uncomfortable, and then back to poignant again. And there's some nice bits like that here. But yeah, overall, it was a nice experience. It does very much sort of wash over you. It's very deliberate. It does feel like, he's really taken the time to frame every shot. I don't get the feeling that any of this film was just, whatever, that'll do. Point the camera at the dogs. Yeah, I don't get the feeling that's happened very much. I suspect it stops slightly short of being a masterpiece. My response to it is more, yes, that was an enjoyable film, rather than, weeping about the transcendent experience. Oh, transcendent, there's something we used to say all the time and haven't said for a while. I don't know. Having read a few reviews and read around it a tiny bit, I don't know, maybe there is a degree of archness, which might be common to other Wes Anderson films, but I wouldn't know, which might stand in the way of getting mega invested. But yes, I did really like it. I didn't quite love it, but I did really like it.
Yeah, well, I'm glad it was accessible. And I take what you mean. This is the mainstream of American independent cinema, in that, it's an auteur director and it's sort of consciously unconventional. It's in the Hollywood style, like I say, the shots are longer, the scenes are longer than the kind of cut, sort of rapid-fire Hollywood style that you get. But, for example, it does have, like, a cast of high-profile Hollywood people. Bryan Cranston is sort of the main character. Edward Norton, Jeff Goldblum, Greta Gerwig, Scarlett Johansson, Harvey Keitel. There's like a lot of big name actors in it. So even though it's independent production, this is definitely of the mainstream of independent.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of reminds you of a lot of sort of other CGI Hollywood animal films you see advertised. They always have a weirdly high-profile casts who presumably just had to turn up for like 1 or 2 days and talk into a microphone for this, and then they've done their bit for the film.
Yeah.
I mean, given previous comments about archness, I guess I should, this doesn't come across as like a sarcastic take on the animal adventure film. The main reason this does mostly work is that he has gone all in and actually made a sincere charming animals try and save the little boy film. It does believe in itself. It doesn't want you to, sneer at it or anything.
Yeah. I don't think it's not trying to be postmodern or meta or anything like that. It is very much like this heartwarming story about a boy trying to save his dog and other dogs trying to help him / save him. Each like dog that he meets along the way, or at least the main dogs, they've each got their own like kind of distinctive character. The puppet for each one is like really, really well designed to give each one like a kind of distinct personality, and the voice actors also do a great job, as does the writing, of making each character feel like a real person. And that's a sense you get with a lot of Wes Anderson films, that even though characters that appear just for like a few lines or a scene or something like that, they've all got something like distinct about them that makes them feel like a real person rather than just a sort of avatar for plot, as you can sometimes get in mainstream films.
Well, yeah, I mean, like a lot of these films that create this sort of stylized world, it does quite a good job of having this sort of background cast of characters who appear a couple of times and are immediately memorable. Like, there's a kid called Hacker, who is a hacker, and who appears in like a few scenes, and despite the fact I don't think he ever actually talks, he's enjoyably memorable, that character. I liked him. And also Scarlett Johansson's Nutmeg is a very fun character again, even though I think she's only in 2, maybe 3 scenes, and in one of them I'm not sure she speaks.
Yeah.
It does immerse you in it. Yeah, it's a nice thing to be carried along with for a couple of hours.
Yeah. In some ways, there's also some differences to Wes Anderson. There is a few departures here, other than the fact that it's an animated film, which he doesn't do so much. I mean, yeah, obviously it's got his distinctive style. There's a lot of usual people that he collaborates with, like Bill Murray, I think, is in all his films somewhere, apart from maybe some of the very early ones. But, there's some people he's collaborated before, like Edward Norton, Jeff Goldblum, alongside new people like Bryan Cranston. But one thing I did notice is this film does have, I think, more of a sense of something at stake and a sense of tension than a lot of his films. I mean, most of Wes Anderson's films focus on interpersonal conflict. So, conflicts between characters and their relationship. There's less of a sense of what's going on with wider society. Society's trying to kind of crush the main characters rather than it just being about the relationship between two people. Where in this one, there is a sense that the government is very anti-dog and is trying, possibly to wipe out dogs or at least push them to the margins as possible, which meant that actually there was, I think, more of a sense of tension and a sense of there being sort of high stakes in this film than a lot of his previous work.
Again, in the way in which he was actually doing the animal adventure genre seriously, it did build to a serious climax where it seemed like characters were in peril and there was a risk of, mass murder or something. Anyway, since it's a fun action film and I don't really think I need to spoil it to describe it, I won't. But there was definitely a big perilous climax and everything, which was played pretty straight in a oh my god, what's going to happen type way.
So yeah, which is I thought was an interesting departure. And obviously he hasn't done a film in Japan before. He's done the Darjeeling Limited set in India, but most of his films seem to focus on sort of New York, America, or a fictionalized version of those. But yeah, this was a interesting departure, I guess. You kind of did a good job of, making kind of the sort of style of Japanese art and design fit in with his own unique style. It seemed authentically Japanese and sort of authentically Wes Anderson at the same time.
Yeah, obviously I don't know what authentically Wes Anderson really looks like. I mean, I guess this is where we have to at least tag past the is this racist, or at least is this cultural appropriation bell. But I don't know. I mean, for the most part, I'd say it did actually feel like he genuinely, had done a lot of research and put a lot of thought into actually rooting the film in the culture, rather than just using it as window dressing. And the only part of it that did slightly ding my bell on that is there's a foreign exchange student character played by Greta Gerwig. Okay, backtracking slightly, there's a gimmick in this film where the dog's translated into English. The barking, you could hear is English, so the dogs talk, basically. The dogs talk in English, but all the humans just speak in the language they're actually speaking. So we can understand people who are speaking English, but not people who speak Japanese. Which does create a film, but feels very, this is aimed at Westerners, despite being about Japanese people. Which is an odd vibe. And it becomes most slightly prominent when he introduces this American foreign exchange student, who then becomes sort of leader of the resistance. I mean, I think this character is introduced largely for practical reasons, because with this gimmick, he needs someone on the human end of the story that speaks English to just get those scenes forward without them being, interminable. Rather than, him actually doing a white saviour thing. I don't think this is him going, full Iron Fist or anything. It just comes across as slightly... I feel like you've gimmicked yourself into a bit of a corner there. I mean, this being a competent film, and Wes Anderson clearly knows how to write, that character still feels rounded and fallible. But that was just one bit that was a bit sort of... feel like you're really struggling against your own conceit here.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a sort of seeing Japan through Western eyes. So yeah, that's why, you had to have these kind of characters speaking English. Yeah, as you say, to make the plot accessible. I did like the fact that, they didn't just have, everyone speaking English, just the Japanese characters with a sort of Japanese accent. They had, sort of actual Japanese in the film. And there wasn't also an element is that they weren't kind of poking fun at Japanese culture or doing a kind of, oh, look how ridiculous this is. Because a lot of the humour in Wes Anderson films comes from how ridiculous people behave, their kind of bizarre quirks and mannerisms. There's a running joke in this film about one of the dogs has this, he's always saying, have you heard the rumour? Have you heard the rumour? And it's kind of the fact that this kind of little mannerism that he's always repeating rumours kind of gets repeated and builds up into a joke. And I think both with this film and with the Darjeeling Limited, he does a good job of poking fun at people's sort of mannerisms and foibles, but not making it ever about their race or their culture. So there's lots of people doing kind of unusual mannerisms in the Darjeeling Limited, but there's never a sense that like you're just poking fun at someone being Indian in it, and it's funny because they're Indian. And there's never a sense in this that people are being Japanese and it's funny because, oh, that's so Japanese. It's funny because that character's got an unusual quirk, and it'd be funny if they were, English or a dog. In this case,
it didn't feel like this sort of story was being situated in Japan in a sort of we're making some specific mocking points about Japanese culture way. I mean, to be honest, you could probably have made this film just on an island full of trash off the coast of New York or something. So,
yeah.
So I guess at least it's something other than whiteness as default if you want to really get into your tropes. No idea if that's something that occurred to Wes Anderson, but yeah.
Yeah, but and he set films in fictional countries before as well, so you could have just created a fictional country. I know there is something to do with the fact that like the Japanese characters in the films are quite inaccessible in the sense that they don't really speak our language, so it's kind of hard to get into the kind of the motivations or the kind of get much more of a strong sense of those characters, which is why, and getting a strong sense of a character is very much a part of a Wes Anderson film. It'd be interesting to speak to someone who kind of spoke Japanese and what their experience of the film was, because it wouldn't surprise me if the writing was as nuanced for the Japanese characters as it was for the other characters, and there's probably jokes or quirks about those characters that we missed because obviously we just don't understand what they're saying.
Yeah, I don't know, a lot of time invaders don't really say that much. I mean, the thing is, in a lot of these animal films, the people are kind of othered anyway, aren't they? A lot of the time they are just lumbering monsters or dangerous threats for the most part, except for like one or two people who are the cute animal-friendly ones.
Yeah.
So again, this has been done a million times in random films with white people, and I guess there's no reason why he had to do this one with Japanese people, except I guess maybe he wanted to. And, it gives the film an aesthetic that makes it feel slightly different from every other talking animal film.
Yeah, but I think the main thing about the film is that it is genuinely funny. Like, I found myself laughing throughout the whole thing. It was never kind of like fall out of the chair, kind of roll on the floor laughing. But, it was very, very funny. But, like, Wes Anderson is rarely kind of, when I say joke, like, in your face. It must be kind of hard to cut the trailers for his film, because there must be a sense of, like, it's kind of hard to take these, like, big set-piece jokes that can just be kind of pulled out and slapped into a trailer. It's very much about repeating things over or people's quirks of their personality or behaviour.
As you kind of said, I didn't do many great big lols, but I was reliably smiling throughout the film. And lots of cute doggy bits as well, like why is that dog digging a hole in this scene?
Yeah.
Oh, it just is. It's a dog. And the sort of cartoon, old school Hanna-Barbera cartoon style fighting where they just disappear into a cloud of dust.
Yeah.
That joke never gets old for some reason.
That's the same in the Fantastic Mr. Fox. Fights are just a kind of in amongst a sort of big pile of cotton wool. I like there's those like little things, like for example, because one of the plot lines involves politicians and the politicians possibly responsible for deporting the dogs. There's a lot of like news coverage of things like that, and obviously some of the ways we get the English language dialogue is by listening to what news reporters are saying. And all the TVs that are showing news footage that appear, all the news footage is a pencil drawn animation. So
yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
That's a nice little like thing in the background, so you can kind of like see the character, but like done as if they were like a sort of like an anime character rather than a stop motion character, which I thought was just a nice little touch. And little things like how the villains have like cat motifs just woven into all of their kind of like their clothing or their buildings. There's always like a picture of like a cat's head somewhere, and that's how they're the villains, because they've got like cat signs, not dog signs. Little things like that are kind of really gave the film its charm, and they're very much sort of a Wes Anderson thing. But it was fun to spot the little things like that.
Yeah, the cute little world of it. Yeah, I liked that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, as a first Wes Anderson experience, I guess this was very much just sort of the big accessible one. It's pretty good.
Hopefully he'll be doing another film again soon, and we can, next year or something like that, we can see how that compares to this.
Okay, and next up, we'll be asking, can any new talking animal film ever surpass The Jungle Book? Because, let's be honest, the prime time for getting into talking animal films is your childhood watching Disney films, and, once you've seen those great early talking animal films, or whichever ones were big when you were young, they just sort of imprint on you. So is there any point in watching new talking animal films as an adult? Should they even really try? Well, I mean, possibly they shouldn't bother trying to surpass The Jungle Book, since they've just made a new Jungle Book, so clearly they're not trying either. But anyway, Alastair, what do you think? Should they even bother?
Yeah, there's life in the talking animal subgenre of films. For one reason, there's nostalgia is popular right now. So, there is a way you can tap into sort of sense of nostalgia, which is something I did feel watching Isle of Dogs. There's a tradition of talking animal films, and this it reminded me a lot of being a kid. In a sense, it's got that kind of sweet story at its heart. and things like that. And I think they should keep making them because, for one reason, which is why, like we said, there is a new Jungle Book. I haven't seen it, but I get the feeling that Disney, they're being quite safe right now. I mean, they're making these films like they just remade Beauty and the Beast. They remade The Jungle Book, live action. I think they're doing Mulan and some others. They're doing Aladdin, sort of live action versions. And the general consensus, none of these films are particularly bad, but it's really not that challenging for Disney to take classics and just remake them incredibly faithfully. So I think we need new talking animal films so that like young people today and kids can discover the passion anew, not just rely on films made in the 60s.
Yeah, I find the whole idea of making these heavily nostalgic films for kids quite weird, because surely they don't have the nostalgia. And I guess that's the beauty of New Beauty and the Beast, but that, you know, adults can go and see it and think, oh, I remember this from when I was young. And they can take their kids with them, and maybe their kids will get into it anew. But, I don't know, I mean, maybe we're striking at the heart of all of Hollywood here, but making heavily nostalgic kids' films aimed at children seems odd. I mean, I guess that's the dream cross-section, isn't it? Films for all the family. But, you know, if I'm going to have films for all the family, I kind of prefer the Pixar ones that aren't just picking at the bones of things I used to like.
Well, I think nostalgia is similar to beer in that, A, kids don't have a developed sense of taste for it, and B, they shouldn't really be given beer anyway, because you can't live only on nostalgia. You have to have some joy before you can have nostalgia.
Nor can you live only on beer.
No, certainly if you're 5, you shouldn't.
If you're 5, you probably wouldn't live very long on beer at all.
No. But yeah, I think there should be, there should be they should be making new films, so that kids can discover them. And the screening we went to of Isle of Dogs, there were, it was a early morning screening on Good Friday. So when I say early morning, it was like before 11. So maybe it wasn't the most well attended of screenings, but there was, I think there was a couple of kids in the audience, along with the hardcore Wes Anderson fans, and they seemed like entertained by the whole thing, the sort of the whimsy of it.
Yeah, a lot of modern talking animal films, perhaps necessarily, seems to be from the CGI animals meeting real people section, which, as someone not raised on it, looks deeply weird to me. But I'm sure if that's what you've been watching since you were 0 years old, you'll probably like it a lot more. Yeah.
Advances in computer technology has made this stuff look a lot less uncanny. That's a double negative, anyway, than it used to be. I think...
What's the alternative exactly? More canny?
They made it more canny, I guess so, yeah. Can anything be canny? It's just like you can't be whelmed. You can't really be canny.
I think canny just means adept and aware, doesn't it? But anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be where animated films have sort of settled. I mean, I guess there's the CGI animation section as well, where all the animals do the sort of witty wisecracks and stuff.
Yeah, which Pixar is very good at, and DreamWorks and things like that.
Yeah, DreamWorks quite known for making films where the main character inevitably does the exact same one eyebrow raised, witty grin facial expression. This is quite a hard point to make in an audio medium. I'm trying to do the face, but obviously you can't see me. I could put a picture up of me doing the face with the podcast, but I'm not going to.
You can Google it and you'll see.
I think if you Google DreamWorks facial expression or DreamWorks character, I suspect you'll get a good idea of what I mean.
I'm doing it right now.
In fact, yes, I've just Googled DreamWorks same face, and it has brought up a massive diagram.
Yeah, if you do image search, you can see people have put them all together.
Yeah, people have made massive collages. So yeah,
which is quite terrifying if you printed that out and just pinned it to the wall above your child's bed. that same face on a panda, a lion, a human, a fish.
That's what their dreams already look like, Alastair. It's too late.
Yeah.
The youth of today dreaming of weird eyebrow raising and probably practicing that expression in the mirror.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess a lot of it is just, like it or not, the market for the sort of the hand-drawn animation stuff that we probably remember in our sad nostalgic minds. It probably just looks hopelessly dated to the kids, and I suspect there's not much you can really do about that. I personally, I liked Isle of Dogs, but I would always like The Jungle Book, or personally speaking, The Lion King, a lot more. Partly, although I don't think Isle of Dogs was that sarcastic, I still think it didn't quite go into the level of real, hard, melodramatic emotion to the same degree that films like Jungle Book and Lion King do. I'd like it a lot, it's always going to hit me a bit harder, especially me when I'm combined with the sweet endorphin rush of childhood nostalgia.
Yeah, I think you're right there. But there's something about the those classic Disney animations of the sort of the 50s and 60s is that they, in some ways, the visuals don't really age. Some of the racism has obviously aged poorly in some of the films, but in the sense that, like, a lot of people complain about, like, modern CGI animations, both in the sense of putting CGI characters into live action films or CGI films in there. After a couple of years, it just looks really old, and like what looked cutting edge looks really bad. But like even like the Jungle Book, because it's a stylized animation, it's not supposed to be photorealistic. Even though it was made in 1967, it still looks good today. And also, I think the writing and stuff was really good. Like, I loved about the Jungle Book was obviously when I was a kid was the songs. The Bare Necessities is such a great song, and I Want to Walk Like You, Talk Like You. There's some, they were really, really well made films, and I think they really have stood the test of time.
Personally, I always really, really liked Aladdin, but that doesn't have that many talky animals in it. Even though I did have a parrot, which I can't... Did the parrot talk?
Yes, the parrot talked. There was a monkey that didn't talk, and a parrot that did talk. And there was an anthropomorphized carpet, which was actually really funny.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's really a talking animal film, but that was probably my favourite in the hand-drawn Disney oeuvre. I also liked Tom and Jerry.
Yeah.
Which reminds me a bit of a bit of a leap. I'm aware that Tom and Jerry is about a cat and a mouse. But is it me, or did cats and dogs fight a lot more in the old days? I mean, like, I know Isle of Dogs has brought this back a bit, but this seems to have become less of a thing. Have cute animal Instagrams won the battle and convinced us all that cats and dogs can actually just live in perfect harmony?
Yeah, or maybe people got tired of the trope of cats versus dogs. There does seem to be a lot more films when they get along now than they fought each other when they used to be sort of sworn enemies.
Exactly. I mean, I feel like if I'm sitting around the fire as an old man and I refer to, two groups of football fans or something, fighting like cats and dogs, I feel like most of the young people nowadays would just turn to me and go, "What are you talking about, Grandad? Cats and dogs are best friends. Have you not seen the internet?" And I'd be hard-pressed to argue. I've seen the internet too.
Yeah.
To be fair, when I was young, my mum's friend had 2 cats and a dog. They seemed to live together quite happily, so I always found it a bit odd that TV seemed determined to convince me they were mortal enemies. So...
I mean, there's like in recent animated films, I mean, it's more than just Instagram and Twitter loves cute pictures of like a kitten and a puppy cuddling and stuff. Or occasionally they like the funny picture of when dogs being terrified of cats.
Yeah.
But that's again because I guess it's a sort of inversion of what you'd expect. But even recent like kind of animated talking animal films like Secret Life of Pets, there's been like cats and dogs that have sort of got along with each other. In fact, that's more of a sort of all the pets kind of getting on together. Yeah, so, sort of thing. So yeah, maybe we're tired of the trope of cats and dogs fighting. Yeah.
At some point, we just sat down around the table at some sort of convention centre and said, "Guys, can't we all just get along?"
Yeah.
And the other side said, "Woof," and then started humping the legs.
Maybe they just kind of, there was a peace treaty signed. They realised it was enough. End of the bloodshed. 2 communities need to find a way to live together rather than at each other's throats. They signed an accord. There was a Truth and Reconciliation Committee to resolve the atrocities committed by both sides during the long conflict. And since then, there's been peace.
But this sounds like a film the kids would just love.
Cats and dogs, truth and reconciliation.
Every moment of the heart-rending negotiation session, yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's not do that. I'm saving my savings for better things.
I mean, I was just talking about Secret Life of Pets, and I think there's been some films like that, again, that are kind of newer takes on the talking animals film. And I would actually say Secret Life of Pets is very funny. It's very good. That is something that, I think that like could be to kids today as Aladdin or The Lion King was to us. I definitely saw Aladdin in the cinema. That must have been like the first film I saw in the cinema. And I definitely saw The Lion King.
I don't know if I saw Aladdin at the cinema. I definitely saw it about 1 million times on my good old VHS tape copy.
Yeah, I'm trying hard to remember now because I definitely had the VHS and watched that a lot, and I definitely saw The Lion King in the cinema. But those were kind of like big early films that made like a big impression on me. Like again, like most people in the West, if not the world, their introduction to cinema is via Disney. But I think something like Secret Life of Pets is an example of something that's kind of continuing that tradition, but not just kind of lazily remaking what went before. I mean, I think it's a bit sad that it doesn't seem to have been this kind of huge cultural phenomenon that The Lion King or Aladdin was. But I don't know if that's because when I was a kid, Disney was like the world, and everyone I knew was also a kid who was obsessed with Disney, so something like that was enormous inside my world. So maybe they seem disproportionately bigger than they were because I was tiny. Or is it a fact that now culture's much more siloed and divided off anyway, and
kids are just one silo?
Yeah, or just things just aren't as big a hits as they used to be.
I think there is that. I mean, there are some Pixar films, which are children's films, that also seem to become big things.
Yeah.
Some of them have talking animals in them, although I don't think the ones with talking animals are my favourites. I'll be honest, lads, I thought Finding Nemo was just okay. Give me The Incredibles or WALL-E any day.
Yeah, they were probably my favourite. I did really like both Incredibles and WALL-E. They were great films.
Although, if we're talking about new talking animal films, the one I wanted to mention was probably the new Paddington films, which
Oh yeah, that's a good example.
have actually done a good job of becoming a bit of a big thing, you know, that kids and adults could watch together, and kids could enjoy the talking animal antics, and adults could weep over the immigration metaphor and the tragedy of Brexit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I give all this shit about how, you know, the talking animal film is dying into nostalgia, but, you know, it turns out if you do an okay job of it, it's fine. I mean, even though it does lean on the nostalgia a fair bit, there's an old character, there's a slightly, is this really real anymore? Version of London that makes us all weepy for how things could be.
Yeah.
But they are really lovely films, despite all that. The second one does hit a bit of a, I see we're doing this again syndrome, but it is still very, very enjoyable and cute.
I think there's another good example, of something that's introducing the beloved talking animal to a new generation. I mean, and adaptations are also, a part of that. I mean, obviously Disney didn't create the Jungle Book. It's based on a Rudyard Kipling book. I think when I was a kid, I did read the Rudyard Kipling story and quite liked it, but seemed to everything like, well, it's just not the Jungle Book. It doesn't have singing bears in it. But I know, I was 8 or something like that. I didn't have much perspective.
I mean, I have zero nostalgia for Paddington. I don't think I ever actually read those when I was younger.
I do remember reading them, and I think there was a TV animated version, maybe.
I might have seen that. I don't know.
Yeah. But no, I do remember Paddington being a part of my childhood. And then, again, it's really nice that now kids today can get access to that.
It's nice that, you know, even though there is always a degree of horrible commercialism and a horrible nostalgia, there's always an extent to which actual quality does still actually matter, you know. I mean, there are a lot of films, we've listed them all many times before, we've probably mentioned some of them in this conversation, which seem to basically just mention an old thing, or mention a thing you vaguely heard of and assume that's all you need to do, and make a stupid, shit, lazy film, and then act surprised when it fails. But it's nice that when something like Paddington comes along, which is both about an old thing and good, it is possible for, you know, the stars to align it actually to get the recognition it deserves.
Yeah.
For all the crap people give the various comic films, you know, the Marvel ones do better because they're better, you know. I don't want to derail this into the 10 millionth discussion on this podcast about cinematic universe superheroes, but
yeah.
I do like the fact that quality seems to win out to at least some degree. It gives me some small faith in the world, even if I'm sure it is also because, realistically, the combination of this film is good and has a gigantic publicity budget.
Yeah, but I think there's an element of Paddington did well because it was good. I know that Mark Kermode really liked it, and generally, I think if he likes it, that's a sign it's a good film. And, you know, there was, I think, a lot of sense of that, it's nice that Paddington's doing well because it is good. It's not just something kind of quite disposable, but it's become popular because parents just want a break from their kids for like an hour, so they pay to go see it. And also there's a sense like the Pixar films, they're popular because they're good. I mean, they are... on average, they are really good films. And like they made a few not so good ones. Like, I don't know, I wasn't so much of a fan of Cars. I know they've done loads of different versions of Cars and Planes now. But the Pixar films are popular because, you know, Wall-E or Up, which also has a talking dog in it, and Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, they're good films, and there's little things that are just like really well thought through about each film that makes them really nice, and I'm glad that they're successful because they're good.
Does the dog in Up talk? I can't remember.
It's got a little collar that translates dog into human.
Okay. It's been a while since I've seen Up because I don't like to expose myself to the opening 5 minutes too many times in case I cry so much that the moisture leaves my body and I die.
Yeah, that packs a real punch. I know, it's as sad as when, like, you know, Mufasa dies in The Lion King. Spoilers, but hopefully everyone knew that.
Exactly, you know, since that's what we're really after in our talking animal films. Sincere emotion. Everyone's first real exposure of death, it's either your gran or a talking animal. Probably a talking animal's mum or dad.
Yeah.
Probably both, to be honest.
What I liked about these films as a kid, and I think The Lion King is like a really good example of this, and actually Aladdin was as well, is that they had really good stories and really good characters that hook you in. And kind of at the end, when I was really young, like the tension would build up and it would just be like a little bit too much for me to handle. I seem to remember like at the end of Aladdin, like Jafar becomes quite scary in when he becomes really powerful, and like Scar again is with his army of sort of goose-stepping hyenas. It does get quite intensely scary at the end, and then as a kid it was very much like, you know, this is serious because it's a bit too much and I'm not sure if I like it, but like then then the good wins out and you have this nice moment of payoff and stuff. And I guess it's that process that kind of hooks you into the magic of cinema. It's that's the kind of initial shot of heroin that's like so intense that like you keep coming back to try and recapture that experience. Those Disney films were really good at just making it just a bit too much for kids to handle and then having the nice ending.
Yeah, you're right, actually. That is very much the experience I remember from my childhood, the grotesque emotional trauma of it all.
I don't know if that's something that they've been able to recapture since. I mean, it's difficult now watching.
I don't really want to talk about, I don't know, I don't really like talking like an expert about recent Disney films that I have not watched.
But I'm saying, like, you know, something like Secret Life of Pets, You know, it's funny and it's got like tense, but is it quite that tense? But I enjoyed it a lot as a film. But I don't know. Also, it's hard to say because I'm not a kid. We should survey some kids.
Cool. I'll meet you back here in half an hour. Yeah.
Next week, Moderate Fantasy Violence will be hosted entirely by 5-year-olds.
I'm going to veto that idea now because it sounds like something I do not want to have to edit.
Thanks for listening. If you have enjoyed this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, then please subscribe in your podcatcher of choice so you never miss an episode. While you're there, please leave us a review, as it helps other people find out about the show. You can also visit our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can find other episodes of this podcast, bonus audio clips, and short written pieces by Nick and myself.
And if you want still more, then you can follow us on Twitter as @MFV Podcast, or just search for Moderate Fantasy Violence. And if you want us on Facebook, again, just search for Moderate Fantasy Violence. And there we are. So you can find out when the episodes come out and occasional updates about other Moderate Fantasy Violence things we might be doing. Okay, I've been Nick Bryan. You can find me online at nickbryan.com, which I will reveal to you exclusively because I haven't mentioned it anywhere else as of recording. Does now have a slightly newer, prettier, cleaner design as of quite recently. I'm still in the middle of reformatting my blog posts for that design, but hey, you can see the new website if you go on there now and read the exciting free comics I've had drawn. And you can also follow me on Twitter as @NickMB.
You can follow me on Twitter at Alastair J.R. Ball, or you can find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com. Join us in the next episode where we will be reviewing Series 2 of Legion, a show Nick and I are both very excited about. Thanks very much for listening. Goodbye.
Bye.
Cool.